Morning, everyone. So, yes, it's budget week. It's the big pre-election budget. This going to be announced this Wednesday. Lots of things have been in the news. Jeremy Hunt has been doing the interview rounds at the weekend. Obviously, he's not been able to say anything about the budget as such, which it's actually quite funny because Rachel Reeves decided she couldn't be asked to do the interviews this weekend. She says, look, I'll be interviewed next weekend because what's the point of you asking me questions about a budget we know nothing about because it's not been announced? But there's lots and lots of reports about what the budget is aiming to do. And what the budget is aiming to do is to cut taxes. And there's two types of narrative going around. First of all, from experts, economic experts, who are saying you can't afford to cut taxes. You are actually just going to really damage. You're going to damage people's standard of living. You're going to damage the economy if you do this, which it's not just, I mean, it's easy to say, well, the Tories don't care about that. It's actually worse than that. The Tories actively want that. And the other narrative going around is that, well, these tax cuts are very unpopular. Like, people want the public services more than the tax cuts. So why are the Tories doing something unpopular? So I want to try and address those 2 points. But the first point is, I mean, like, where is it? There's an article out today. Front page of the Guardian. In fact, there's front page of the Daily Express and the Guardian, both, slightly different angles here. So in the Guardian, it says budget plan risks forcing UK into second lost decade, Hunt warned. So this is from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which is a sort of basically a left-leaning think tank, as you'd call it, that focuses on living standards, poverty, things like that. So what they're saying is, without this investment in public services, it's that they're basically going to crush our infrastructure for another decade. The Tories think that'd be a brilliant idea because I said some time ago, in a way, if the Tories are deluded about the polling, and if they think to themselves, oh no, it's good, we're going to do like 1992, we're going to pull it out the bag, then that's actually better. The problem was always going to be when the Tories realised that they're going to lose. If the Tories ever sort of came to the conclusion that they're definitely going to lose, we're in trouble, and they have. They know they're going to lose. So now they've turned from trying to save the election to trying to salt the earth for Labour. And that's what's happening here. So when economists or others are saying, look, if you cut taxes, you're going to cause economic problems, the Tories are thinking, great, fantastic. But the harder they make it for Labour, the better. They want a situation where Labour cannot actually say, at the next election, oh, we've improved your standard of living. Now, in reality, the Tories are getting something fundamentally wrong there, because they're assuming, again, this works to our benefit, the fact they don't know what's going on. They're assuming that if Labour cannot significantly grow the economy, that they won't be able to show any tangible benefits because they're stuck in their trickle-down economics theory. Whereas Labour understand that even if you can't significantly grow the economy over the next few years, if you can redistribute wealth, people will still feel better off. Which is, as I say, I always keep saying, remember, the very first thing that Labour want to do in power, the thing they've promised to do within the first 100 days, I think it is, in other words, it's straight away being implemented, is their workers' rights bill. And part of that is basically going to make it much easier for people to improve their income. Now, I just want to point out to something Jeremy Hunt said yesterday. He said, I've lost the thing now. I don't know the exact quote, but he basically said that the government has a moral duty to cut taxes because it has to put more money in the pockets of the people who are earning that money. He says that money's your money and it should be in your pocket. And you think to yourself, okay, right. To the average worker, his reported, we don't know what's in the budget. He's not allowed to announce it. But we're told he's going for about a 2p cut in income tax. some other things as well. 2p cut in income tax, right? That is worth less than £6 a month to an average worker. So he's basically, to an average worker, giving them about £5 something a month, right? So I had a little look. To the average worker, they are earning, in real terms, £190 a month less than they were at the last general election. So Jeremy Hunt's saying the government have got a moral duty to take £190 a month off the average worker and give them a fiver back. That's what this is about. So it's absolute nonsense. This government have been promoting wage restraint. You would give people more money if you were to have allowed, if you'd have encouraged their wages to go up, at least in real terms, if not more, than you would in tax cuts. And you could then keep the taxes and invest in public services, right? So that's what the Tories, I think, are missing. I think that's their mistake. They think, because they just have their mind on this trickle-down theory thing, they just assume, well, if you keep the economy boxed in, then people's standard of living can't increase and Labour can't do anything about it. So all we'll do is we'll constrain the economy so that Labour can't do anything about it. To which Labour will just go, well, even if you constrain they're still going to try and grow the economy, but even if they can't, they can still make sure that people are better off. But then the second part of it, actually, I might go through some comments before I do the second part. Man's thinking he's Nigel Lawson, not realizing Nigel Lawson was stupid. I've noticed they've rolled out Norman Lamont. I think Norman Lamont, who someone recently described as looking like Darth Vader without his mask on these days, because he's quite old. So he's apparently advising Jeremy Hunt on the budget, or he has been. The budget will now be done. I mean, the budget has now been finalised because the Office for Budgetary Responsibility have to do their report. The budget will have been already done and dusted. It was just waiting for it to be announced now. How much do the millionaires, billionaires save on this tax cut? Well, not very much either. This, in all honesty, the Tories are not completely stupid. They know that there's no point in giving tax cuts to millionaires in this budget. They need to try and retain some of their core support here. So this will be very much tax cuts for ordinary people. It's just, it doesn't amount to very much. So if they cut income tax by, because again, it depends what's announced. If he just cuts the sort of the 20% rate by 2p, which I assume is what they mean, it won't be worth that much. Now, if they cut all income tax bands by 2p, then yes, that will be worth a hell of a lot to very rich people as well. So we'll have to see what's actually announced. Again, I'm just basing this on reports that aren't very detailed. But so every time there's a crisis, ordinary people end up paying. I'm heartily sick of it. Make super rich pay their fair share. Well, this is exactly it. This is why we keep saying, you know, what tends to happen is you end up with these governments, you know, they sort of they privatize the profits and nationalize the losses. And the reason, of course, is because you can't afford a crash in the money markets because pension funds have invested in them. You can't afford to let pension funds go to the wall because that'll be deeply unpopular, as well as create an epic crisis for the government to deal with as well. So it's cheaper for the government to bail out bankers than it is to deal with the fallout of pension funds disappearing. But the Norman, if it isn't hurting, it isn't working. Lamont, yes, that's the one. That is the one. The one who basically, in fact, you know, David Cameron was one of his advisors, you know. David Cameron, before he became an MP, was an advisor to Norman Lamont while he was Chancellor. And Norman Lamont made such an arse of it, he had to be replaced by Ken Clarke. The very person you want advising you on a pre-election budget is, but the reason is because, you know, they're sort of thinking that association, although it was Ken Clarke. Ken Clarke was the Chancellor by the time of the 1992 election, wasn't he? I think he was anyway. But anyway, the second part of it I want to go over. So I've noticed some commentators saying that this seems to be mad because they can understand why the tax cuts would scorch. It's a scorched earth policy. It's salt in the earth for Labour. They can get that. But they're thinking, but you're going to lose even more seats because it's really unpopular. Because there's quite a few polls going around that show that for a lot of people, they'd rather the taxes actually went up and they got better public services. People in the UK do not mind paying taxes for good public services. So why are the Tories doing this when it's actually really unpopular amongst the voters that they're trying to retain? And there's a couple of things I could show. I'm first of all just going to show this. Now, this is from 2015. This is a poll from 2015. This was after a full parliament of austerity. And it showed, because the Tories argued for austerity into, oh, we need to get the deficit down. We need to get public debt down, which they rose, of course. They increased public debt. But it showed that most people wanted investment in public services, even if it meant more debt, even if it meant the deficit didn't come down. So all of the arguments for austerity were not popular. Even in 2015, after 5 years of austerity, you know, public polling would show that most people wanted public services to be invested in, even if it meant more debt, even if it meant the deficit staying up, right? So you roll forwards to now. I need to find it now just to show this idea because it seems mad. Oh, Ken Clark replaced Lamont after Black Wednesday. Okay, thank you. But I just want to show you this poll now. Now, I just need to. Now, this is going to be awkward. I'll just try and show a bare bit of it here. If I put that there. So this poll shows attitudes towards tax and spend. Now, you can see that this is for all adults at the moment. You can see the sort of cerise pink line. That is a belief that the government is taxing too much. So in other words, and it's spending too much for public services. So these are the people who want to see the tax cuts and want to see public services get less. And you can actually, you know, on it, you can see there's more of those than think that we should tax more or that have it about the right level. So this sort of narrative that it's deeply unpopular is not quite true. But the most important thing for the Conservatives is their own voters. So if we've got it for Conservative voters, we can see 41% think that the government is taxing too much and that it's spending too much on public services. So in all honesty, for certain Tory voters, it is the case that they think they want the tax cuts. So it does sort of make sense. And think about the sort of people who will benefit from these tax cuts. It's mostly retired homeowners. The voters, that is their ultimate bastion of core support. Because although I say that for the average worker, they are £190 a month worse off just in terms of income. And yet the government are talking about giving her a £5 back in income tax savings. And then there's a few quid extra in national insurance as well. The national insurance cut doesn't help retired people. Encouraging wage growth doesn't help retired people. The only thing that helps retired people is low inflation and low taxation. That's all they care about. They should care about public service as well. I know what you'll be thinking. Some of you may have already said it. Why would elderly retired people favour a few quid in tax cuts over being able to get healthcare? They shouldn't, but that's not how some people think. The sort of people who vote Tory don't ever link taxes with public services for some reason. I don't know why. They just sort of assume that public services are what they are and they just naturally happen, and it's totally separate to the taxes they pay. Scala says it's beyond ridiculous that Britain is in a perpetual state of austerity. enough is enough. Brexit was meant to be a benefit. Still waiting for the good times to roll. Well, quite. I mean, the latest data is showing that our trade compared to other G7 countries has been completely, kiboshed. We have struggled, and it's not COVID. It's not the war in Ukraine. Our trade, even after all those things, continues to be poor compared to other G7 nations who also had to deal with COVID, and several of whom also had to deal most directly with the war in Ukraine as well. There's a bit of a comparison here saying Major's Conservative Party had some ethics. This lot are a completely different beast. Well, that is certainly true. Yeah. I mean, the way John Major's government was seen in 1997 was the public saw John Major's ultimately decent, and he just had too many rogues in his cabinet. One criticism that's leveled at John Major is he wasn't sufficiently ruthless. He showed too much loyalty to cabinet colleagues who were basically letting the side down, and he should have been more ruthless with them. I mean, John Major is the one who introduced the Nolan principles for, the 7 tenets of behavior in public life. And he did that in response to the sleaze that was emanating, not so much from him, although he was having an adulterous affair, but we didn't know that at the time. But not so much from him, but from his cabinet colleagues. Whereas now, they're all just seen as a whole, well, to coin a phrase, a parcel of rogues. If we refer to Robbie Burns there. But they are, the whole lot of them are just seen as rogues. Bizarrely, there was for quite a while, there was a time where Rishi Sunak was seen as better than his party. But now I don't think that's even the case. Rishi Sunak personally is now seen as a bit sleazy and and out of touch and not caring. That was never the case for John Major. So even in 1997, despite the fact that the NHS was on its arse, again, not as bad as now, but it was on its arse, despite the fact that public services in general were suffering, despite the fact that the Conservative Party was seen as being not in touch, not taking people's concerns seriously, not behaving themselves, not maintaining proper standards of behavior. John Major was, it was almost like the public would think, if only the rest of them were like John Major, we'd be all right. That's not really the case with Rishi Sunak. He's not seen as fundamentally decent, but just trying to lead a band of rogues. He kept the affair out of the public. Yeah, I can't remember when it was revealed. I forget, but it was a long time afterwards. It was a long time after. But so yeah, I mean the fundamentally, this budget, whatever is announced this Wednesday, is going to be bad for the country. And but it's not necessarily unstrategic for the Tories. If as long as excuse me, just have a little drink. As long as they recognize that they're going to, I think they know they're going to lose the election, and they're going to lose it quite badly. And I think, it's a case of trying to retain their core support so they don't get beaten too badly in their own heartlands. So they're trying to sort of win over the last group of voters who can vote in large numbers, which is basically retired homeowners. They're the ones they're focusing on. Those are the, you look at, I mean, we can't say anything too definite until the budget is announced, but we can just look at it as they're going to try, and I don't think it's going to be a budget for the rich. I'm sure there'll be some things in there that are good for the rich, but I think their priority is probably going to be that core support, which are not multimillionaires. They're well off, they're reasonably off, but they're not multimillionaires. So I think that they're actually going to focus on making sure they can retain that core support at the same time as knackering the economy for Labour, because like I say, in their heads, people's living standards is tied to economic performance. And yes, if the economy grows, people's living standards rise. That's true. But it is not my argument is it's not the only way to raise people's living standards. You know, there's two ways to raise people's living standards. You can grow the economy, and that's preferable for everyone, but you can also redistribute wealth. So even if the national cake stays at roughly the same size, or even gets smaller, you can still make most people feel better off as long as you cut that cake into more equal bits, if you see what I mean. Nick's saying there, so we've gone on to Brexit. Oh, do I like a bit of a talk of Brexit? It says, quite, Starmer's hard no to single market and EAA. I will point out how we can't join either. Well, it's sort of the same thing from our point of view. We can't join them. It says Brexit standards handed the Lib Dems an open goal. Well, you say that, but the Lib Dems are saying the same thing. So, and I understand where you're coming from. You sort of think empirically, well, doesn't that leave Lib Dems open to capturing that ground? But they're not doing. They're not doing. Why is that? Because they can't, and people know they can't. We can't join the EEA. There's no legal mechanism to join the EEA. There hopefully will be in a few years' time, assuming that France can stop, you know, just keep Le Pen out for another time. Then hopefully in a few years there will be. But at the moment there isn't. It's not possible to join the single market in any form. But I'm hoping in the following parliament there will be, because there's a plan that is support. Well, I mean, Macron came up with the plan, but it's strongly supported by Germany as well. And usually that's all you need. If France and Germany are fully behind something, that's usually all you need. So I'm very hopeful in a few years' time. The funny thing is, Spitting Image kept going on about John Major having a massive crush on Virginia Bottomley. If only they knew. Well, exactly. And he was also portrayed in Spitting Image. He had this grey puppet, and he was always going on about the peas, wasn't he? It's like they were making him out as this really boring man. I was like, mate, you don't know half of it. None of us did. Simon says it's the redistribution of wealth that's the important thing. It is, and it's something that I just wonder if the Conservatives are even considering it. You know, I just think, are they so? Is their ideology such that they can't even conceive of the concept? That, because here's the way I put it. Because you know, there will be people who are skeptical, at least, maybe even downright distrusting of the Labour government, and that's fine. Absolutely be skeptical of politicians. You should always be skeptical of them. Do not give them the benefit of the doubt ever, especially if they're sort of in your tribe, because you are more naturally willing to give people sort of seen as in your own tribe the benefit of the doubt. Don't do that. Hold their feet to the fire. But the way you look at it is this: Labour. The Conservatives, right? Let's say the Conservatives did win the next election. They've screwed over the economy. Doesn't really matter. The media will give them a pass, right? The media will cover for them. The media are already covering for them. You've got the Daily Express today. Its headline is, "Can Hunt and PM pull rabbit out of hat?" They're wanting them to do these tax cuts. The Daily Express are egging them on for these tax cuts. So they will give the Conservatives a complete pass. Laura Kunsberg yesterday was basically saying, oh, yeah, the economy's buggered, but it's not the Tories' fault. Supposed to be a pissing journalist on an independent, on our national broadcaster, and she's basically going, oh, yeah, everything's knackered, it's not the Tories' fault. You what? So the, the media will give the Tories a complete free pass. They will never give Labour anything. They will blame Labour for things that are not Labour's fault. So they will definitely call out. If Labour fail to deliver, they will be calling it out all the time. So Labour have to deliver. If Labour want to win the following election, of course they do, they have to deliver. And they know that. They're not idiots. At the end of the day, they're 26 points ahead in the polls on YouGov and 20 points on average across all major pollsters, right? And, you know, so if anything, their poll lead at the moment is rising slightly. So they know that. So they're going to have to deliver. If they cannot deliver economic growth, if this scorched earth policy prevents economic growth, then it doesn't matter whether you believe that Starmer and Reeves and co want to deliver a better distribution of wealth. They have to, because there's no other way. Because to suggest that they won't is to suggest that Labour are comfortable winning the next election. I don't know how stupid you have to be to believe that Labour are putting all this effort into winning this election only to think, yeah, we're quite happy being in power for 5 years, then back to opposition, because that's a nonsense. That is an absolute nonsense. So we will definitely get a redistribution of wealth, because it may well be the only thing that Labour can do. And I think it's something the Conservatives are not even thinking about, because I think it's so alien to their thinking that I don't think they're even considering it. I think they're purely thinking, we'll crush the economy, we'll completely knacker public services, we'll allow the schools to fall down the hot, because that's what they're doing. There's no plan to rebuild the schools and hospitals. You would think, at the very least, wouldn't you, that the hospitals and schools that have actually collapsed, or the parts of the buildings that have actually collapsed, you would think there was at least funding to rebuild those. But there isn't. There isn't. They're not even rebuilding those. They're just letting them collapse. You know, they're giving money for porter cabins. They're, you know, cancelling services in hospitals, like, oh, that theatre's got a ceiling that's collapsed now. Oh, you can't have surgeries there anymore. There is no plan to build them. They're just leaving all of this for Labour to deal with. And Labour will have to deal with it. Otherwise, they won't win the next election. So they will deal with it. And they will deal with it by making sure that they redistribute wealth better for people's living standards. And they will deal with it by making sure that they do raise the tax revenues needed to repair these schools and hospitals. And they will do that by closing off more and more tax breaks for the wealthy. You know, the Tories, by doing what they're doing, and I don't think they realise it, are actually forcing Labour, even if you do believe they didn't want to do it, they're forcing Labour to say, well, we're going to have to close off these tax breaks for them, which has the effect of taxing the rich more. They're going to have to, and they're going to have to deliver a better standard of living by making sure, not cutting taxes for ordinary people, we don't need taxes cutting, but by making sure that incomes rise. And that's what their workers' rights bill will do. It will put workers and unions, it gives more powers to unions as well, to demand higher wages. Because like I said, compared to 2019, the median income, so the average worker was taking home last year £190 a month less than they were in 2019 in real terms. As well as paying more on energy, more on housing costs, more in taxes, because even with this tax cut, the overall tax burden is still going up, right? More on food, more on clothes, you know, more on fuel. So all of these costs have gone up, their wages have come down. And what's the Chancellor saying? Oh, we'll give you an extra £6 or £7 in tax savings to compensate. And everyone should be pointing this out. Whenever the Chancellor, at the weekend, whenever he was saying this in an interview, the journalist opposite him should have been pointing that out. You are talking about giving people a few quid a month back, but you've taken off them about £200 a month from the average worker compared to 2019. And you've made the cost of, in real terms, the cost of energy increase, the cost of food increase, the cost of fuel increase, the cost of food, clothes, everything. But anyway, a couple of Brexit questions to finish off then, why not? If the UK is allowed to join EFTA, it won't be. Then that brings the potential of other EU nations going back on full membership. It's not even that. EFTA don't want us. Why would they? It'd be madness. The UK economy, I know we've taken a hit, but the UK economy is still a giant. It is bigger, way bigger than all the other EFTA economies put together. We'd be like a bull in a china shop. They don't want us. They don't want us at all. I mean, our economy is large enough to, like, this is why I say that one of the main things queering the deal with joining the EU is this idea of joining the euro. So there's a lot of people in this country who go, yeah, we'd like to rejoin the EU, but not adopt the euro. And I keep saying, I think we could get out of that. I think we could negotiate out of that. Mostly because I don't think a lot of the other countries in the Eurozone want us in. because we would, again, our economy is large enough to be obstructive in terms of monetary policy inside the Eurozone. We don't see eye to eye. Britain has a fundamentally different attitude towards monetary policy compared to a lot of major economies on the continent. I think they would be quite happy for us not to join the euro. But I mean, that's just my speculation. We won't know until we try. But there we go. Right, last little comment on redistribution of wealth. Captain Coconut says, all sound nice and dandy to redistribute the wealth. Problem is the distribution of Labour donors from the membership to private enterprise. Phil might be disappointed. They've already announced it. They've already announced the workers' rights bill. It's going through. Within the first 100 days, it's going to be law. And we know what's in it. There's no blind faith on my part. I'm far too cynical. I've been observing politics for far too long. No such thing as blind faith on my part. They've already announced what they're going to do, and it is absolutely going to mean people demand higher incomes. It's simple. But there we go. But we'll leave it there. We're out of time anyway. We'll be back. I'll be back on again tomorrow. I think Rate of Grain then for the rest of the week. Have a very good day, everyone. And until next time, I'll see you later.